Hi, my name is Brianna Davidson, and today I'm going to talk to you about the Synoptic Gospels. First off, the Synoptic Gospels are actually only Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But just to be extra conclusive in this class, we are going to be including John as well. Matthew was the first book in the order. It was written to Jewish Christians in 75 to 80 CE, after Romans had destroyed all of Jerusalem. Mark was actually the first book written according to the timeline, and it was written to Romans by a second generation Christian and a follower of Peter. This was written in about 65 to 70 CE. Luke, on the other hand, was written to the Gentiles by a Gentile Christian. He was a physician and Paul's companion. It was written in 80 to 85 CE. And lastly, John was written to everyone by the beloved disciple in 90 to 110 CE. And this is a period where the Jewish leaders had banned the Christians from the synagogues. There are a lot of differences and similarities between the four books, but here's just a shortened summary. Matthew uses a lot of Jewish terminology and speaks of the Christ that has been foretold. He uses language such as son of David and son of Abraham to reference the prophets of old. Mark, on the other hand, was shown he represents Jesus in a way to impress the minds of the Romans. He shows Jesus as the wonder worker, the miracle worker. And Mark is very, very straight to the point. He's incisive, he doesn't waste time with details, and he's very straight to the point. Luke speaks as Christ as a friend of humanity. He has a lot of cool parables in his book, The Prodigal Son and The Lost Piece of Money. John, on the other hand, takes us all the way back to the beginning from the first line and talks about how the Word was God and the Word was with God. John is very different from the rest of the books, and we're going to talk about that briefly here. There's differences in the style, the plot, and even the presentation of Jesus. Um, the presentation, for example, in John's Gospel, we don't see Jesus perform an exorcism. Um, Whereas the Synoptic Gospels, that is a main feature of Jesus. Also, Jesus teaches in long discourses in John, but he doesn't use as many parables as we see in the other synoptic gospels. John also includes a lot of unique material that is not mentioned in the other three books. But it is very similar to the rest of the Gospels. You still have the same basic story, the overlapping events, and the overlapping sayings. Next, we're going to talk about the cultural context and Jesus' ministry in the Gospels. It's important to know that the culture was so different than the ones we face today. For example, there was the honor shame culture. These were really important values that set the standard for all social interactions. Honor was both ascribed by your birth and acquired through different social interactions. And that was a really important context to know for the Gospels. Second, there's also a sense of collective identity. You are defined by your family and their reputation. There's also limited goods and resources compared to what we see today. The human material exchange was different. Honor and shame were exchanged in a much more informal and less easily measured ways than what we would expect. The purity laws was very important, especially from the Old Testament. They were intended to separate the clean from the unclean. And lastly, you have the Greco-Roman and Jewish political and religious landscapes that add quite a bit of context to what God's people are going through. Jesus himself was very countercultural. Of all those things that we just mentioned of what the culture was looked like, Jesus was actively different than most of them. For example, Jesus was poor, unmarried, and a servant. Those are already things that even today our society yearns for. and humanity has always sought in their hearts. And Jesus was not married, he did not have money, and he came to serve others. Jesus' whole goal was to change hearts and not political battles. The Jewish people were waiting for Jesus to come and conquer the politics, but that's not what Jesus was here for. He was countercultural. And his miracles were divine acts. They showed that God's kingdom had come, and they demonstrated that Satan's hold over people was being attacked. Overall, in conclusion, the Gospels clearly showed that Jesus is the foretold Son of God who has come to bring God's kingdom back to earth. It was a counter-cultural but life-changing message for us all to hear.